Hey friend, have you asked yourself lately how much screen time is considered healthy in this new digital age, and how can I effectively guide my kids through it? Well, I've got some great news for you. In today's episode, we're diving headfirst into these pressing questions. Our special guest today is Dr. Gwenyth Jackaway, a true expert in the field of communication and media studies. She's been teaching and researching for over 25 years, and she's passionate about understanding how technology affects our relationships and our very sense of being human. Now there's the big question. How do we navigate the digital landscape with our kids without causing more harm than good? Dr. Jackaway will share insights into the concerns parents have when it comes to screens and technology, and the pitfalls of simply saying no screens allowed. We'll explore the dangers of unregulated content and excessive screen time, and the need to find balance in our tech-infused lives. Dr. Jackaway will guide us on how to help our kids develop healthy screen habits and introduce the concept of digital wellness. Plus, we'll delve into the world of parental control apps and monitoring to ensure our children's online safety. So stick with us to the end because there's a treasure trove of actionable advice coming your way. Let's learn how to nurture our children's relationship with technology from a place of choice, so they use technology and technology doesn't use them. Get ready to unlock the secrets of digital parenting with us today. Hi, I'm Billy, and this is the Unlock Your Child's Full Potential podcast. I'm a mom of 3 lovely girls, and I'm looking for answers. I'm looking for ways to fill the gaps left by the school system and teach my kids the lessons that are going to prepare them for real life. I want to learn practical tips that I can use to raise capable and confident young people who are kind, caring, and authentic, and who bring value to the world. I know it's a lot, but I think as parents, we have the unique role of nurturing the potential of the special human beings entrusted to our care. We can't expect school and the teachers to do everything, and we don't want to let the environment decide who our kids become. It's up to us to coach our children on how to be successful and fulfilled. That's my goal here, to talk to as many parents, educators, experts, you name it, and ask the questions, look for the universal principles, find as many tools as possible to be a better parent, and give my kids a head start in life. If that resonates with you, join me every Wednesday and let's inspire each other to create an environment where our children can blossom into the best versions of themselves. Welcome, Gwenyth. I'm so happy to have you on the show. The topic of digital wellness is one close to heart. Technology is part of our lives, but as a parent of young kids, I'm concerned about making sure my kids are safe online and they develop healthy screen habits. Would you like to start by telling us how you bring your 2 passions together, mindfulness and media? It seems so counterintuitive.
Really, that's interesting. Well, I'm happy to talk about that. For me, it took a while to see how they're related, but now that I'm there, I see it everywhere. So a little bit about my background. I spent almost 30 years as a college professor on the campus of Fordham University in New York City, which is where I'm based. I was a member of the faculty of the Communication and Media Studies Department. So that's a program that talks about the role of media in society and trains young people to go work in the media. So those were the kind of students that I had. And I spent a lot of decades talking to people in their late teens, early 20s about media in an age before social media took over our lives and then a bit afterwards. And my area of interest in terms of my academic research and my teaching has always been on the impact of new media on society. I am a media historian by training, so that means thinking about older media when they were new. The alphabet, the printing press, the telephone, movies, TV, we're used to all those things, but once upon a time they were new. And each time there's a new medium, some people get really excited and some people get concerned, and parents are often at the forefront of trying to wrestle with, okay, now we have, televisions in our homes, or now we have video games. And now today, of course, the new challenge is the smartphone and electronic gaming and the internet, which none of our parents had to deal with. So none of us who are older than 30 we don't have a model of how our parents did it, so we have to come up with some new techniques. I do think, however, that we can learn a bit about all of this from studying the past, which is part of why I'm a historian. But it's worth pointing out, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners are aware, that parents often have some concern and resistance when something is new, and then everybody gets used to it, So there's not as much concern now about television. There was a lot of concern about television when I was young, when it was a new technology. So I think that's just worth keeping in mind, that each generation, because we live in a society with so much technological innovation, there's always going to be more machines, and guess what? There's going to be even more. So it's not like once we get
sadly
it
so
out,
yeah,
right? I mean, there's pros and cons to technological innovation. So you'll get it figured out, and then when your grandchildren come along, may they come along, there'll be some new thing, right? So I think part of it is for all of us to learn how to adapt, learn to think wisely about how to integrate these technologies into our life in a balanced and healthy way. You asked me, how did these two things come together? So I spent years teaching about the media and the impact of new media. And then on a very separate channel in my own personal life, I've been meditating for years, found my way to meditation after dealing with some illnesses, and very grateful that I found my way to mindfulness. Doesn't have to, compete with anyone's spiritual beliefs. It's just about being here in the moment now and not getting, spun off into all of our mind chatter, which is often the source of a lot of distress. So if we can learn how to breathe and come back to center, then we have more choice over where we're going to put our attention. So that's mindful attention. And I was thinking about the media. And then when the smartphone came along, I started seeing New Yorkers walk around with their face in their phone on the street, of course, on the subway. I've seen people riding bicycles with headphones on, looking at a screen. And it hit me one day, everybody is doing a screen meditation. And that's when it clicked for me, like where we put our attention. Mindfulness is about helping you get your attention right now to this moment, which often we're not, right? We're in the past, we're in the future. We kind of miss the moment altogether, right? Once your birthdays start to rack up, you're like, wow, another year, where did that go, right? Because we miss it, right? We're always worrying about what's next or ruminating about what was, and the moments go by, and you see that when children grow up so fast, and you're like, where did the years go, right? So we got to get present. And then I started to think about being intentional with our attention. And so these current technologies that we're working with now are fundamentally different than TV and some of the earlier ones because of the algorithms. The current technologies that we're all learning how to live with, which are very new historically, even though it feels like they've been around for a while, it's a blip in the history of humanity. We've never had this much cognitive input coming at us all the time. Like our ancestors who lived in the jungles or, in the woods or wherever, they didn't have all of this intense stimulus. And they certainly didn't have stimulus that was custom made for you, right? So when you open up your social media platform, it's like, hi, Billy, we know based on your past activity, here are all the things that are going to appeal to you. And that's not just because they're being kind, that's the economic model, right? The longer they keep you on the screen, the more you'll see the ads, and they'll gather more data about who you are and what you like and what you're likely to buy and that's of course true with our children as well. And even though my mom worried about me watching too much TV, it wasn't saying, hi, Gwenyth, based on your last viewing activities, here are the show, right? And that it was just TV was on and you turned it on or off. Now we have these devices that are constantly tracking our activity and then feeding us back content that's most likely to hold our attention. And we have an attention crisis going on. So that's how these two things come together in my mind. Digital wellness is about being mindful about our media habits. I hope I've answered your question.
Yeah, I love the answer. You've done extensive research on the topic. Would you tell us in what ways communication technologies have altered our relationships with ourselves and others?
So one of the things that makes human beings unique is language and our ability to communicate with each other in complex ways. So clearly the other creatures on the planet, they're communicating, but presumably they're not having deep discussions about ideology or how to organize their society, right? We appear to have a more complex cognitive activity, and we can link up our brains with each other through language and image and writing and art and all the different ways that we communicate. So our communication with each other is an essential component of the human experience. So when we have new tools, that opens up new possibilities, and it also brings new dangers, right?
Let's talk about the dangers.
You want to hear about the dangers? Okay.
Yeah, let's educate people.
All right. So some of the dangers have to do with the content, and this is not unique to the current round of digital media. That was also true for the arrival of film, right? So back in the 1910s, 1920s, parents were worried about what kids were seeing in the movies, and that, of course, was true with TV. And so there's always concern about content and what children should or should not be exposed to, and that continues now. And in some ways, it's of more concern because now, for children who actually have phones, and certainly by middle school, many American kids have phones, and some kids start younger, or they'll have an iPad. If it's internet enabled, then they have access to all human communication, which some of it is positive and some of it is very negative, even for adults to be exposed to. And then there's things that, depending on your values and your parenting perspective, you may not feel is appropriate for your child at whatever age they're at, right? So allowing kids free access to the internet is kind of like turning them loose in the old version of Times Square. I'm a New Yorker. Times Square's gotten cleaned up a lot, but when I was younger, it was all, porn shops and kind of creepy places, creepy movie houses, and, a lot of adult content. Not that there's anything wrong with that for adults, but we wouldn't necessarily want to allow kids just free reign there. So that's already a question of concern about the content. And then there's the issue of the nature of the stimulus for the cognitive function. So, and this is where we get into a little brain science. Our brains release certain kinds of neurotransmitters that help the various sections of the brain communicate, right, internally. So and you've probably heard about, most people know about serotonin because that's one of the chemicals that antidepressants help regulate. So, all right, so serotonin is a feel-good chemical that our brain makes. Oxytocin is another feel-good chemical that's more about love, and serotonin is more like excitement, happiness, pleasure. And there's another one called dopamine, and dopamine is the chemical that our brain secretes when we're hunting and we're seeking for things. And that's a very important neurotransmitter. It gets us going. It's what helped power our ancestors to go find food and mates, and it still helps us do those things. When you're shopping online and you're hunting and you're like looking for that good bargain, and you feel that sense of engagement and focus, that's dopamine. You can see it on people's faces in places like Atlantic City or Las Vegas when they're gambling and they're really focused. And you see it on the face of children playing video games or people of any age. It's that intense sense of focus. It feels good. It's linked to adrenaline, and like you feel excited and engaged. So it makes it harder to put it down. And it's highly stimulating and it feels pleasurable. The current technologies, let's take social media. Social media borrows a lot of things that were learned back in the 90s when electronic games started becoming available. So in electronic games, as you probably know, people can get points, you level up, you save the princess, you get another life. Like there's all of these rewards, and that keeps you coming back, and it extends your desire to spend more time in the game or more time on the platform. And social media works the same way. You get hearts, you get likes, people share your post. So that means they liked it, and everybody likes to be liked. And social media is so engaging because we want to connect. That's a natural good thing. We need to connect with others.
But there's not just love on social media, right?
You're
there's a lot of bullying.
Right.
So for an underdeveloped brain, like a young child, it could go wrong.
Absolutely.
So let's explore that too.
Okay, so absolutely. There's plenty of bullying. Of course, bullying is not new. Bullying has been going on. It seems to be a human behavior, unfortunately. It happens on the playground, it happens in the school bus, it happens online. And sadly, a lot of adults engage in bullying on social media, on all the various kinds of platforms. There's plenty of adults engaged in bullying. And sadly, that, at least in our society, that has come to be a norm. Of course, being a target of that kind of negative statements, bullying can be very hurtful.
And even if it's not bullying, but it's more a comparison game, like people are doing so much and I'm not good enough, I'm not doing the right things. And kids get so anxious and stressed. So I think if we can wait a little more before exposing them to all the social media apps, that would be beneficial.
I absolutely agree. There's an ongoing debate about what's the right age, and I don't think it's quite uniform across all kids, right? So people mature at different rates, and ultimately you have to know your child. But social media, as the platforms are currently constructed, they're not being constructed with the well-being and safety of our kids in mind. None of the platforms were made for kids. They were made for adults, and Instagram has a rule about over 13, but as we all know, it's not particularly well enforced. But even at 13, people aren't really grown. I mean, they can't vote, they can't drive cars, so it's sort of odd to be calling them adults. There's a lot of data to show that it's particularly harmful for girls, because we live in a society that's so focused on appearance, and for girls and young women, and they very quickly absorb the message that the way you look is a key piece of your value. And so the longer we can protect our future female leaders from that kind of message, the better. But, blocking kids from technology can only work for so long, because they start to feel like they're missing out, and they hear that all their other friends are on there. So while taking a hard stand and saying no screens, no technology, if parents can navigate that set of challenges, and that's certainly a viable choice. But I actually think that really harsh, strict rules can backfire, because then once the child is either out of your house or reaches whatever age that you set as, then you can have social media, they won't have developed habits of how to have a balanced relationship with the technology.
So what are some good practices for developing those habits?
Great. So first, let me tell you a little bit about digital wellness as a concept, and then we can talk about practices. Okay. During lockdown, one of the things that I did during the pandemic, or that round of the pandemic, I did some training in digital wellness instruction. And also, I'm also certified as a mindfulness meditation instructor. And I mentioned that not necessarily because we need to talk about mindfulness, but I wanted to really develop the skills of how to talk about the mind and attention. And so if we combine a commitment to physical and psychological well-being with some of the principles of mindfulness, and we can think about teaching our family, and it's not just the littlest members of the family, but teaching our whole family how to live with these technologies from a place of choice, so that we use them and the technologies don't use us. So if you think about wellness, that's a term that's come to be associated not only with a big industry, but also the way your whole lifestyle and the way you take care of your physical, it's usually thought of as a physical health. So we need enough sleep, we need enough exercise, and we need enough hydration and balanced nutrition. You want to combine all of these things to have an overall healthy lifestyle. Now, since we spend so much time on these screens, all of us, all ages, it's time to add our relationship with our technology into our overall well-being formula. So
that's smart.
Right. And, the statistics vary and it depends on people's professions, but people are spending many, many, many hours a day engaging with screens. And some of it's because of people's work lives, but then it's our social lives and our consumption of news and our consumption of social media.
And it's so addictive. I find that
right.
people, even if they're in their car waiting at a stoplight, they still look at their phone.
Right. So that experience of feeling addicted, and I just want to clarify, it's not the same as a heroin addiction. Like, you're not going to go into physical detox distress, but it can be psychologically addictive. And the thing that ironically, what we're addicted to is that dopamine. It's like, oh, let's see if somebody liked my picture. Oh, let's see if I got an email. Oh, what's going on in DC or wherever, whatever news you're following. And our brains are wired to monitor the environment. That's how our ancestors survived. Like, we always have to be looking for danger. Am I safe? Is there something important going on? That's how we came to be, is our ancestors survived long enough to pass on their genes. And now we have these devices that can give us constant updates. Now, it ultimately does not touch my daily life, what's happening right now in wherever, some country on the other side of the world. But now I've become invested in that story, and I want to see, oh, did they save those people, or what's happening with this thing? And even if it's not about me, you get hooked on the story.
Yeah.
And I took a few news apps off my phone because I started to realize I'm checking for news, like, I don't know, 50 times a day. I don't work in politics. It doesn't really matter whether I stay updated every hour. And this brings me to a key point about what are some practices. I think one of the first things adults can do if they want to help their kids have a healthy relationship with technology is check out your own relationship with your screens. Because kids are watching us all the time.
That may be so hard for many parents.
Well, right. And yet there's a sense of, oh, it's bad that our children are on screens. But what are they seeing when they look at us? Right. And so that whole do as I say, not as I do, is not great. I understand a lot of adults need to use their screens for work. But once upon a time, people came home from work and work was over, and then they were in their homes. Now, of course, people would disappear into the newspaper or a football game, or there's lots of ways for people to check out from each other. But work ended at 5 or 6 at night.
Yeah, good point.
Right. And now this is a whole other problem about digital wellness in the corporate environment. And, if you tell a 5-year-old, well, I'm working, but you can't use your device, they're not going to really understand that.
Yeah.
Right. So here are some things. Have a conversation with young people. They understand a lot more than, I think children are underestimated about what they can understand. And, you don't have to get complicated and talk about the brain chemistry, but you can say, these devices are really useful for some things, but we need to have balance. And there are places where you can use them and times when you can use them. And then there are times when we should be doing some other things. I think it's very important for a family to set up, at least, if it's not every night for dinner, then at least once a week, have a meal without devices at the table. So everybody can get practice talking to each other without having an escape valve.
Oh, yeah. We have to develop those social skills, because otherwise they won't be able to talk to people in person.
That's right. And when you see these photographs of teenagers all sitting together with their face in their phone, or not just teenagers, young adults as well, they're all out to dinner. You go to a restaurant and you see a married couple, or it doesn't matter if they're married, and everybody's got their face in their phone. Kids are learning that this is normal behavior. So if we think it's a problem, that's the first thing, is to check in on your own device use. And create family activities that don't involve a screen. So I think it's great to watch TV together. I think it's great to game together with your kids so you get a sense of the games they love. But it's also important to show them there's ways to have fun together as a family that doesn't involve technology. Because if you say, put the phone down, but they haven't learned any other thing to do, then they're going to be, I'm bored. Now, of course, boredom can be really useful, because out of boredom can come creativity.
And otherwise, there's no downtime.
Exactly. That's right. And the brain, the brain needs a rest. It's good to have time just with yourself without any input coming in. Another way that you can help kids develop healthier habits is there's a wonderful app. There's a company that I work for, and I do parental education about digital wellness with this company called Carrots and Cake. The name is based on the kind of age-old parental advice: finish your vegetables before you get to your dessert, all right? Or do your homework before you get to play. If you get into a big power struggle with your child about the pad, then you're the enemy. The technology is the treasure, and you're in a power struggle with your child. But really, you're in a power struggle with Wall Street and Silicon Valley and the world of advertising. And all of those big forces have combined to create something that's almost irresistible. So if you can align yourself with the child and say, I know it's really tempting and I want to use mine a lot too, but we need to have balance and we need to take breaks. So what Carrots and Cake allows you to do is you can install it on your phone or on an iPad, and you set up the rules. Carrots are educational apps. So maybe it's Khan Academy or Duolingo or PBS Kids, anything, something that's age appropriate where the child will learn. And those are lower dopamine platforms. They're not full of bells and whistles and games and rewards. It's calmer. And they need training. School is not going to feel like a video game, right? They need to learn how to sit and pay attention and learn. And those platforms are a little bit gamified, but they're not designed to be addictive. You don't hear people talking about getting addicted to Khan Academy or getting addicted.
Right.
Right. I mean, there's learning and they make it fun, but it doesn't have these big bursts of dopamine. And so you set it up. Let's say you have to do a Zoom call if you're working from home, or if you're in a restaurant and you need your children to be quiet, or you're on an airplane and you want to make sure you don't have, a tantruming child. You can hand them this pad and they'll be learning, so you don't have to feel guilty. And you set it up so it blocks access to the internet. So you know that they're going to be safe and doing things that you've already approved of. And then afterwards, they get their cake time. And the cake is something they can choose, or you choose with them, you approve it, and then they get a certain amount of time doing the fun thing. And it'll warn them, okay, you have, 2 more minutes, 1 more minute, because we know that children transition better when they get some warnings rather than just suddenly it's over. And then it's over. And then it's a good idea to have a toy or a game or some crayons or something set up that they can transition into another activity if it's possible, given the physical situation.
I love that, because every time I take the tablet, they're so agitated that their time is up. We have beforehand set a time limit. We are watching TV for 30 minutes. Mm-hmm. And every time after that, they're upset because it's over. Right. So I like the timers that are reminding you have 3 minutes left, you have 2 minutes left. That's
right. And it's important to help children to understand that things end. Like a book, you get to the end and then the story is over. A TV show, now there's so much television that's available 24 hours a day, but the show ends. And they understand that the show comes to an end. They also know there's more shows there, but we can teach kids things come to an end and then we move on to the next activity. And I think it's very useful for them to learn about that, because transitions are hard for people in all sorts of circumstances, and it's good practice, And you can even do that when they're watching TV, because they don't know about the commercial breaks and how long a show is, because they're not very good at a sense of time. So you can even build that into the TV watch, and you can say, okay, this show is going to be ending soon. And so they start to get used to the fact that things have a beginning and an end, and then we're going to do something else. And then when they're old enough to have their own phone or their own tablet, or their teens, and you're not able to monitor them all the time, they will have the experience of putting it down and doing something else. And as they get older, it's important to explain to them why there should be limits on this and the value. They need exercise. They need face-to-face conversation with other people. They need face-to-face interaction with their siblings, or go out into the world. A life always on screen is a life out of balance. And
so our main tool is conversations with our kids.
Well, that's one of them. conversations, but also modeling, right? Modeling good behavior. And even yourself saying, you can say, all right, I need to make a phone call, or I need to, go and do an email. And then I'm going to put it down when the clock says this thing, right? And even if the child can't tell time yet, you can say when the numbers say this, or when the clock looks like this, I'm going to put it down so that they see you doing it too. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. I think that younger kids are easier, but once they are like 10, 11 years old, they have their own smartphone, then it becomes hard. How do we approach?
Well, so one important piece of advice is no phones in the bedroom. That's not hard to impose on a 5 or 6-year-old, but by the time you have a tween or a teen and they're starting to have their phones on them all the time, it's important to set up some time when they are physically it's not right there next to them all the time. And that's true for us too. So one great way to do that is you have a charging station outside their bedroom, and they start to learn, like, after a certain time of night, that's it. They don't have access to it. And that's important partly because kids are up on their phones at night. You think they're going to bed, and they may say, good night, mom, and they might even act like they're going to sleep, or they might go to sleep for a while and then wake up in the night and they're texting. And one of the things that is so essential for adolescent brain development is sleep. So I don't know how old your girls are, but once kids hit adolescence, they sleep a lot more than kids at around 8 or 9 or 10. They start sleeping more in their adolescent years because they're growing and they're changing their bodies, and they need a lot more sleep. And that's an essential component of adolescent mental health, is sufficient sleep. Then conversations with teens about their social media presence, and teaching them about keeping their data private and being mindful that what they post, even if they think it's private, someone that they think is a friend could take a snapshot and share it later if they stop being friends. And right. I mean, once something's online, you can't know for sure that it's going to stay private. That's part of raising teenagers now, is to help to teach them to be aware of what they're putting out in the world about themselves.
What do you think about parental controls and monitoring our kids' social media life and all that apps? Is that beneficial, or we have to educate and then let them be?
Cake is a parental control app, but it does not involve the active surveillance of child's media use. And that's what it sounds like you're asking me about.
I know there are both types, restricting their access and then monitoring what they're doing.
So, some of this is about parenting philosophy. And I want to be respectful of those who maybe take a more strong stand about setting a lot of rules and creating a lot of punishment for the infraction of those rules. So I recognize that that's an approach. It's not my approach. I think that surveillance backfires in the end, because if kids know they're being surveilled, then they'll find a way to hide. They'll create some alternative ID that parents don't know about. So they might have their account that they know their parent monitors, and they're being good kids on that space, but it's not that hard to create an alternative identity online. So I think that setting up a relationship of surveillance implies a lack of trust, and kids feel that. And they're likely to quickly figure out what's not considered appropriate and hide it. Then, if they have a real problem, they may not feel safe to come and tell you about it, because maybe they've created a fake account and now they're being harassed by some stranger online, but they're afraid to come tell you because you didn't know about it because they're doing this fake account. Right? And it can snowball.
Excellent point. Yeah.
Right. So I think being really honest and saying, look, there are some not nice people in the world, and if you ever have anybody to reach out and it doesn't feel comfortable, please come and tell me. What you want to do is to create an environment of trust. If you're asking to see all the texts that are going on between them and their friends, then they have no privacy. And I think that young people need privacy. I'm a pretty progressive parent in that way, but I know just from my own teen years, and my mom did the best that she could, but kids need to have their secrets, even if it's not such a big deal secret, like a secret friend, or, they're emerging humans. And these early years shape their future lives. And so I think if they feel safe with us, we're more likely to hear about it if something's not going well.
Yeah, I agree.
Just a few other thoughts about healthy practices. So I mentioned having family activities that don't involve screens. That's not just about in the house. If you go on family vacation, if everybody's on the beach on their face in the phone, it brings the problems along. And so, take a walk. I have a dog, so I have to take him out every day. I try to bring my phone in case of emergency, but I try to make my walks with him just about walking and breathing and enjoying being outside and noticing the trees and saying hi to people. If everything you do is accompanied by the screen, then the kids start really feeling that that's the normal thing. So I think we've got to make screen-free activities seem engaging and interesting. And you can play games like, let's find red things on our walk or whatever.
But there's a lot of good on the internet. So where is the balance?
So, engaging together in media content is a great example of some of the good. So I've introduced my son to some of the fandoms. I'm a big Star Trek fan, grew up with Star Trek, it's still around. Same with Star Wars. And, that's a form of media consumption we do together, and it's bonding and we talk about it. And there's a lot of great games to play together. So that's how I would get the balance, is show them, and you can learn so much. There's wonderful websites where you learn a lot. So I would say that's one of the ways that you can show them that there's balance. There's good, but anything that's good, too much of it is out of balance, right? If you exercise all the time, that's not healthy. If you eat too much vegetables, your stomach will get sick, right? I mean, even good stuff, you have to keep it in balance. I did want to let you know that there's a special opportunity for your listeners. If they're interested in checking out Carrots and Cake, and go to the website, carrotsandcake.com. They can have 60 days free, do the download, and they should use the code word potential.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Gwenyth. I'll put that in the show notes. That was a very, very pleasant conversation. I learned so much.
Thank you. My pleasure to help.
Thank you so much for listening and letting me be a part of your day. If you enjoyed this episode or the show in general, please share it with a friend and help me reach more moms around the world. Also, if you find some value in this podcast and would like to help support it, please visit my Ko-fi page. The link is in the show notes. Any contribution is much appreciated. And lastly, don't forget to subscribe so you get notified when a new episode drops. I'll see you next week.